Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Ite Namani. Harinama said, "This is Miles over here. He'd like to get initiated." And so I was looking at him. I had not actually surrendered up to that point, even though I had, intensely wanted to join. I had not surrendered. And so I looked at him and I said, "What is your date of birth?" Because I had been into astrology before that. The hippies used to call me Gandalf because I liked, magic and astrology and so on. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, astrology? You like?" And he pointed at me. "You like?" I said, "Yes." "Your date of birth?" And he said very proudly, "September 1st, 1896. And I said, "And what time?" 4 o'clock. And that was the exact moment I surrendered. That somehow left such an impression on me that I felt to myself that, well, what good is all this astrology? I still understand that. It is a Vedanga. Now, of course, I can verbalize my feelings. It's a Vedanga. It's a limb of the Veda. But by itself, it's useless, unless a limb is useless without the body. So I said, well, this is a great scholar, a great spiritual master, a very kind-hearted person who's accepting me. So let me accept him as my spiritual master, read his books, and forget about astrology, which I did. So that was the first time I met Srila Prabhupada.
Actually, the first time I met Srila Prabhupada was through his books. Lochan had given me a book to read. It was the Sri Ishopanishad. And by reading that book, I realized, here are all the answers. Everything I've been looking for, searching so hard for, it's right here. So then when I moved into the temple, I was introduced to Srila Prabhupada in the form of some of his other books, Krishna book, and especially Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam first canto, the original versions that Prabhupada had brought, the brown-bound versions with Prabhupada's unique style of English writing, which was so charming and enchanting. I just became intoxicated by Srila Prabhupada's books.
I joined 61 Second Avenue. It was an old brahmachari temple. Sarup was there, but he wouldn't speak to me because I'm a girl. And so Brahmananda and Jayadvaita found out that I was his sister. He had mentioned me. And Brahmananda gave me my first sari, and Jayadvaita showed me how to put tilak on. He put tilak on me, really sweet. And they sent me to Boston, where Satsvarup was a social worker at the time. It was 69. It was, I think, October of 69. So I actually joined in Boston. And the first time I saw Prabhupada, he was coming that Christmas. So I joined right before Prabhupada actually came to that temple. I know that for a fact because one of the brahmatrinis kept singing, "He knows if you've been chanting." And it's like, ay, ay, ay. And it was pretty whack. So, okay, so before I know it, Prabhupada's there. And it was a little bit intimidating. I just remember when he was coming into the temple, everybody yelled, "Prabhupada," and Saradia ran past me with a mridanga and actually knocked me over. It was like frantic. And so I decided, I don't know if this is right for me, these people. So I went and hid downstairs in the, where the press was going to be, behind a pillar. I just stood there and hid. I still couldn't make up my mind if I was actually going to do this or not. And before I knew it, the devotees were showing Prabhupada the downstairs where the BBT was going to go. And they walked around, and all of a sudden I was just exposed, standing there behind a pillar. I don't know if I gave a namaste. I don't know what I did, because I was really brand new and terrified. But later on, when I got initiated, Brahmananda told me that he explained to Prabhupada who I was, and that Prabhupada said, "Ah, yes, I remember her face." And I was so touched by that, like that Prabhupada would remember who I was. Such mercy. It's unbelievable.
This is in Boston, 1971, and he came to the temple and he gave a short address speech. He sat on the Vyasasana in the back of the temple, and then we brought him into this one room that we had fixed for Srila Prabhupada to use while he stayed there. And it was just a small room, maybe like 10 foot by 12 foot. And he just, a few like greetings and stuff, didn't say much. But because it was late, Satsrup Maharaj said that, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, it's late, and we've rented a hotel room for you." And Srila Prabhupada, his eyes just got really big. And he said, "Hotel?" He said, "I'm not going." And he quoted a verse, and he said, how do you say it? He said, "The country is in the mode of goodness, the city is in the mode of passion, but a hotel is simply a brothel." He said, "I'm not going." He said, "But the temple is Vaikuntha. I'll stay here." And he did. The 2.5 days that he was in Boston, he just stayed in this one room, real simple room. And he was, just so happy to stay there instead of going someplace else. And of course, as devotees, we loved it that he was there, staying with us for that time. And this one older gentleman had convinced, Satsrup that the temple wasn't good enough for Srila Prabhupada to stay in. And he rented actually the best hotel in Boston, the Four Seasons Hotel, the penthouse suite, and he paid for it. But Prabhupada didn't go there.
Well, the first time I came to the temple, I was 17. And actually, the very first time I came to the temple, it was a Sunday feast. And Prabhupada was giving a lecture. I remember the lecturer, he had mentioned Watchtower. And when I saw Prabhupada, I immediately fell in love. And the lecturer had convinced me this is a pure devotee. And I wanted to be a devotee. And I told the temple devotees that I wanted to join right then and there. And at that time, there was no question of you had to be 18. They put me in a sari, and I joined. I didn't even tell my parents. And it took them quite some time to find out where I was. And my parents were very strict. I was brought up in a strict environment. And it was about 2.5 months before they found me. And it upset them very much, even though they were religious-minded. It was something new and different. So I had to go back home and finish high school. But when I turned 18, I went back to the temple. But immediately when I saw devotees, I knew that's what I wanted to be, a devotee. It was something I knew that I had experienced in a previous life. It was something familiar, something that was not something I felt I had known previously. And it was like a reawakening, a similarity that I felt I could pick up easily.
I have been at New Vrindavan for about 6 months, first in a very communal setting of farm work, and then Kirtanananda Swami and the roadshow came with Vishnu Jana Swami, and it became a more devotional atmosphere. And at the end of the summer, Srila Prabhupada came for the 72 Janmashtami festival, which was a gathering of many, many devotees from the East Coast to be initiated in our new temple room at New Vrindavan. So that was the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada physically, was when he came to New Vrindavan. Of course, I'd only heard his tapes, and being young and not accustomed to that Indian accent, I'll just call it, it had been a struggle for me just to be able to understand what he was saying. And when I saw him in person, that was like my first experience of the humanity, the significance of having a living spiritual master as opposed to one in a book. And yes, it was pretty profound. It was right there on the walkway at New Vrindavan.
My first, I would say, personal experience with Prabhupada, besides getting a cookie from him or him patting me on the head, was when I was 4 years old. I was at the time dressing as a sannyasi and had my danda, and we all met Srila Prabhupada at the airport, and I was in the we were all in the kirtan. I was in it, and then at the end of it all, I got to ride back to the temple in the Cadillac with Srila Prabhupada. So there was the driver in the front seat. My father was in the passenger seat doing security, and Prabhupada was here, and I was in the back seat. I danda, and Prabhupada was there, and I was just like, literally, this was the best day of my life. And so we're on our way back from the airport, and Srila Prabhupada takes out this big cookie that someone had given him. And he could see that I was obviously interested in the cookie. So he broke it in half and gave it to me, and I just ate it down real quick, just buried the thing. I was, super excited. And then I'm sitting there, and Prabhupada is just barely got into his. I think he was talking to, Hari Sari or somebody, whoever's in the front seat, the driver. He was talking to the driver, and didn't eat his right away. So I'm sitting there with mine finished, and Prabhupada still has his thing, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a Brahmin. I'm supposed to wash my hands. And Prabhupada's sitting right next to me, and he's going to see that I don't wash my hands after I eat. And I'm 4 years old. This is the biggest problem that I could ever have. And I just remember, my danda sitting next to the door, and I'm just like, I'm touching it. I'm thinking about what's going to happen. Am I going to be exposed as a smarta Brahmin or a false Brahmin? So I keep cool, though. I watch Prabhupada and see what he does. And Prabhupada eats his cookie, and without touching his fingers to his lips. So he eats his cookie, and when he's finished, he goes. I look over and I say, and the time it was just such a relief. You know what I mean? There were all these pressures on me. I'm a Brahmin. I gotta wash my hands, or maybe take a shower, even take a bath. This is some pretty intense pressure. And Prabhupada went, and instantly my suffering vanished. The suffering that was in my mind, disappeared. And this event has meant more and more to me over the years as the time has passed, and I've had different realization and experiences, and I've come to take it as that meaning time, place, and circumstance.
So the next day, we had the initiation ceremony. There was no fire sacrifice. I was the only one getting initiated, and Prabhupada would be leaving the day afterwards. But we had a nice Vyasasan for him, nice Jagannath deities in the temple. And I had those big blue beads that we had in those days. The same ones all the early devotees, Kirtananda, Hayagriva, they all had these big blue beads. And so anyways, he gave me my beads and said, your name is Patita Pavana. And I did not understand what he said. So when he was going out that day, I went over and stood right next to him. And I remember he was so short and yet so effusive. He filled the whole room with his brilliant light. And he said, your name means fallen deliverer. And I looked at him like, he said, fallen deliverer. So I asked Harinama how to spell it, and he said, well, I think your name is Patipama. And I said, you didn't write it down? So he said, well, why don't you write to Srila Prabhupada? He's in L.A., and we'll find out what your name is. So Srila Prabhupada wrote back, my dear Patit Udaran, now, my dear Patit Pavan, now Patit Udaran. The meaning is practically the same. It was deliverer of fallen souls, and now it's uplifter of fallen souls, because there had been another devotee initiated, I think, in New York, Patita Pavan. He became Kitchen Petit, to separate him from me because he was a good cook. But it's interesting that I had asked Srila Prabhupada about astrology the day before my initiation. And if you go through the list of nakshatras, there's 27 constellations within the 12 constellations. And each one of these vibrates to a certain syllable. And within Virgo, which is I was to find out later, my moon sign, Pa, Po, Pi, Pa. So he gave me a name. That's what they do in India. They name you according to your Rashi or your nakshatra. So he basically named me according to my Rashi without even knowing what my Rashi was. I mean, this is one of those things where Srila Prabhupada displays that sense of all-knowing that just leaves devotees flabbergasted.
When he called me up for initiation, this is in Boston, 71, and he said, you know, how many rounds do you chant? And I said 16. And what are the 4 regulative principles? You know, I said them, and I can remember just being like so nervous and didn't want to, you know, I was really like, whew, glad I remembered the right things to say, you know. And I was just kneeling at him, I'm not kneeling at him, but kneeling in front of him, kind of looking at the floor. And he said, so your name is Soma Das. And he said, Soma? Soma means the moon. And when he said that, I said, the moon? You know, is he chastising me, or is he making fun of me, or what? You know, I thought we were supposed to get names of Krishna Das, you know, or something related to Krishna. What, the moon? So I looked up, and I looked into Srila Prabhupada's eyes, because I was just kind of like bewildered, and it seemed like a long time, you know, it's just kind of looking into his eyes, but it was, you know, it was like he could see my soul, you know, he could just completely see right through me. And all of a sudden he just had this big smile, and it just like, you know, lit up the whole room. And he goes, you are moon-like. And then of course everybody goes, Jai. And so then I paid my obeisances and went to sit down, and the very next devotee, my godbrother Sudas, was next. And you know, the same drill, you know, what are the 16 rounds, how many rounds do you chant? What are the 4 regulative principles? And he said, okay. And of course he has your beads there that he had chanted on. And he said, so your name is Sudas. Sudas means very nice servant of Krishna. Do you understand? And he's handing him his beads. And Sudas said, no. And Prabhupada took the beads back, and he said, do you want to be or don't you? And of course he smiled, and Sudas said, yeah. And he gave him the beads. But it was, Prabhupada was joking with him, and it was very humorous.
Yeah, I remember my first morning walk with Srila Prabhupada. It was when he came to New Dwarka in 1973, and I remember I had just written the Sankirtan scores for that day before, and I asked Karundar to give it to Srila Prabhupada, which he did. And Prabhupada wrote back a handwritten note, which is so amazing, where he wrote, thanking you, you boys and girls, and I have so much thanks. I give you so much thanks because you are helping me serve my Guru Maharaj. Surely he will give his blessings, pour his blessings, 1,000 times more than me on you. And that is my satisfaction. And then he wrote, NB, note below, everyone should join the Sankirtan party as soon as possible. Now this is in Prabhupada's handwriting here in New Dwarka. So right after that, I asked Karundar, can I go on a morning walk? And I was allowed to. And so that's the first time I'm now physically with Prabhupada in a very personal and intimate way, and I was very much in awe and reverence. And I was just listening to whatever was being said, but I didn't feel at all that I was anyone other than a pebble that was a fly in the wall, or just someone fortunate enough to be there. So I never felt for quite a while that I should even talk to Srila Prabhupada. Although I was writing to him, and Prabhupada knew me, but I didn't feel I could actually speak to him. I had too much awe, and I just worshipped him too much, and I didn't want to ever disturb him with anything that I might be concerned with. But I didn't have too many concerns back then. I was a simple brahmachari, just living the life of a Sankirtan devotee.
I was married to a devotee named Sridham, who was Prabhupada's personal servant in the late 60s. And it was during the time of the so-called moon landing. And Sridham told me that while he was massaging Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada would talk about this moon landing. On one of the times, Prabhupada said that when he was a small child, his father took him to the cinema to see a movie about a big gorilla. And Sridham said, "King Kong, Prabhupada?" And Prabhupada's eyes got real big. And he said, "You have seen? You know about?" And Sridham said, "Oh, yes, yes. Everybody knows about King Kong, Srila Prabhupada. It's a very famous movie, and everybody knows about that gorilla." And Prabhupada nodded. Ah. And he said, "Well, in this movie, it looked like the gorilla was climbing the Empire State Building and swatting airplanes. But we know that that's not true, that the clouds that the airplanes were going through were probably cotton, and it was toy airplanes and a toy Empire State Building and not even a real gorilla." He said, so in this way, they can very easily make it look like they had landed on the moon, when in actuality, we know that they didn't. And then he went on to explain the motivations behind this, that it was due to the government wanting to instill a feeling of patriotism and national pride in the public, because they would soon be raising taxes substantially on the American people. And sure enough, Sridham told me that within a few weeks later, spread all over the newspapers was a giant tax increase. And Prabhupada said, yes, this is why they have said they have landed on the moon.
I was given Brahmin initiation. It was a very big initiation. I mean, Jaya Pataka was initiated first, and Gopal Krishna was initiated. And I remember Srila Prabhupada gave some very intimate lectures at this time, because he was now returning to New York triumphantly. He had, struggled and started everything from New York. And now he's coming back. He's got, 10 temples or something, or 12 temples, 300-400 devotees at this point. So he told the story about how King Yudhisthira one day asked Krishna out of curiosity that, I was the king of the earth, my wife is the goddess of fortune, and I'm your friend, and now I have nothing. He compared himself to King Yudhisthira, how he had come to New York with $7, and now look, he's got 10 temples, and he's got several hundred devotees. And how when he had first met his spiritual master, his idea was that he was going to become a rich man. It had been predicted Prabhupada would be very rich. Of course, it came true, but in a Krishna-conscious way. But he said, by the will of Krishna, everything was taken away from him, and he came to America with $7. But now he was returning triumphantly. And the next day, he gave a lecture, which was very direct. It was like a continuation of the previous day, that he could do it, we could do it. And the lecture the next day was, he gave the example of a hot iron rod. As iron, what does it do? It's cold. But if you heat it, it basically becomes the same as fire. So he was saying, I expect all of you to become spiritual masters. It was expected. It was like an order. I mean, this really blows apart the Ritwik theory, that he expected us to simply represent him as Ritwiks or Pandits. He actually wanted us to become initiating gurus. Of course, that's no small task. Well, anyways, I remember at the initiation, I had brought my brother. I have a twin brother, and he was initiated Madhu Mangal Das, first initiation. Madhu Mangal, he was a character. One fellow had come and asked him about Yogananda. He was very blunt, and he told the fellow, Yogananda is crass nonsense. So the guy I went to Prabhupada and said, he was shocked. He said, one of your disciples says Yogananda is crass nonsense. So Prabhupada says, if he says something I did not say, then he is nonsense. And that cooled it off. But anyways, now it's time for my Brahmin initiation. So I go up and Srila Prabhupada, he shows me how to chant the mantra. And so I looked up at His Divine Grace, such a great spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. I mean, so overwhelmingly, so divine. I looked up at him and I said, let me be your devotee life after life. And there was like this rumbling from within, and I wasn't quite sure what I heard. It was like a volcano going off. He didn't even look at me. So I repeated it. And I realized what he had said. Bow down! I will definitely, if that's all it takes to become your devotee life after life, I definitely will bow down.
This was only a few hours after I had been initiated, and such a wonderful experience. Srila Prabhupada accepted all my karma. He accepted me as his disciple. I had a new name. I was ecstatic. And because Srila Prabhupada stayed in the temple room, in the temple building, there was only 2 bathrooms, and the men's bathroom, they said nobody else can use this. This is for Prabhupada's personal use only. So we had to share the women's bathroom, the men and the women, the time that he was there. So only a few hours after my initiation, I was waiting in the hallway to use the bathroom because some Matajis were in there, and me and Patita were standing in the hallway, and it just so happened that we were right in front of Srila Prabhupada's door, where the room that he was staying. And we were just waiting, and all of a sudden the door opens, and Srila Prabhupada comes out, just in his gamcha. And Patita, who was my older godbrother, he just yelled loud. He said, "All glories to Srila Prabhupada," and he threw his hands up in the air. The hallway's only about this wide, and Prabhupada's right there, and he really yelled and threw his hands up, "All glories to Srila Prabhupada," and then paid full dandavats in the hallway. And Prabhupada could barely walk by, but I also paid my dandavats, to follow his example. And Prabhupada just walked, like 10 feet down the hall and into the bathroom. And we got up after paying our obeisances, and we just looked at each other and thought, yeah, wow, that was really sweet. Prabhupada just, coming out like that. And Srila Prabhupada was only in the bathroom maybe 30 seconds, and he comes back out. And again, Patita, really loud, "All glories to Srila Prabhupada," throws his hands up in the air, and then full dandavats. So I also paid my obeisances there too. And this time, when we stood up, Prabhupada was just standing there right in front of us, looking at both of us. And it's really like one of my favorite remembrances of Srila Prabhupada, because I had just been initiated, and here Srila Prabhupada is standing in the hallway, in his gamcha, and the expression on his face was just so incredible. It was like he was like a little kid. He was like almost a little embarrassed, from Patita yelling like this. And he had this, very beautiful, compassionate smile that just really like melted you. He had like so much compassion and love, and all of a sudden to be that close and intimate, with Srila Prabhupada like that, my heart just kind of wanted to, surrender to him and dedicate my life to helping him.
I was doing service in the kitchen, and my service was to set up the deity offering in the morning. And I had to go into the temple to set up the plates. It was in the morning before Guru Puja. And as you all know, Prabhupada would give out cookies. And this time, someone had made sweet balls instead. And the temple room was packed. there were devotees from the San Francisco, San Diego, Laguna Beach temple. It was so packed, and Prabhupada would give out sweet balls to the children, the mothers first. And I thought, how can I get a sweet bowl from Prabhupada? I had to go in the kitchen to do the offering, set up the plates. And I thought, there's no way I could get this sweet ball. At one point, when Prabhupada was done with the children and the mothers, he started throwing the sweet balls in the air. And the crowd just got ecstatic. And the men just got closer and closer to Prabhupada. And everyone was jumping up. And I thought, no way am I going to get a sweet ball from Prabhupada now. And I had to go into the kitchen. So I got on the floor and paid my obeisances. And as I'm getting on the floor offering my obeisances, I'm in the back of the temple. And my head goes on the floor. And I'm looking, and this sweet ball is rolling straight at my head. It's a whole unsmashed sweet ball. And I'm looking, and I was just so amazed that it didn't get smashed by these stomping brahmacharis. And I was amazed that Krishna and Prabhupada knew my desire. I'm so happy that I could go into the kitchen to do my service on time and still get the sweet ball from Prabhupada. So I put the sweet ball in my bead bag and ran into the kitchen and did my service. And I was just very grateful that Prabhupada gave me my sweet ball.
And then I think it was the next day I gave him these books that I had bound. And he was so pleased to see that his Bhagavatams were now like, he wrote me several letters about this, saying that, oh, these books are, any gentleman would be proud to own these books, so nicely bound up with gold stamping, and he loved them very much. So when I gave him these books, he nodded, he said, yes, yes. Very nice, very nice. So I said, Srila Prabhupada, before I met you, I was crazy. And now I'm not crazy. He said, no, you are not crazy. Your brother, Madhu Mangal, he is crazy. And then he looked back at me again and he said, hey, you American boys and girls, yes, you are very nice. But he wouldn't stop looking at me. He started pointing. He said, yes, you are very nice. Then he said, and you are qualified. All glories to Patita Dadan. And I mean, this was a moment. This was a moment when it was just like lights and brilliance and transcendence. And I could not understand it at all. This is when, the pure devotee, spiritual master, releases just a bit of his glory. Usually he appears almost like us in a way. He would walk with us and chant with us, and he was always like just a little bit above us. But sometimes this window would open and you would realize exactly who you are dealing with. The direct representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is in front of you. And this was one of those very rare moments.
There was a very important instruction in the very first letter that Srila Prabhupada ever gave me, or wrote to me, where he was so amazed at this first Christmas marathon, and I could hardly believe 17,000 books in 3 days from one temple. And he wrote throughout this letter about how important this is to distribute books. And then I came to the very last sentence of the letter, where Prabhupada wrote, but more important still, I mean, the whole letter was about saving others, but more important still is save yourself. And it seemed like it was just put in there at the very end, yet the whole letter was just building up to saving others. So I reflected on this for a long time. I still do. And gradually I began to understand what Prabhupada's instruction was, that if you're spiritually pure, you can save others. If you're not, this is not a material activity, book distribution, and you will not be successful. In fact, one of the letters I wrote to Prabhupada is that, will we be contaminated by so much association with the non-devotees? And Prabhupada wrote back, no. If you are spiritually pure, if you're following the regulative principles, chanting your rounds, living in the association of devotees, attending the classes, the Mangalarti, if you're doing all of those things, you are not of this world. When you go out, you will be protected.
I was the first widow in the movement, the first widow in ISKCON. And because of that, I was called in for a personal darshan with Srila Prabhupada. Now, I'll have to give some background information for it to make sense. Okay, I joined the movement in my teens with my younger brother, got married after 8 months, opened different temples with my then husband, and had a daughter. Then he fell away from devotional service, left the movement, and then left his body. I wanted to know if I was prohibited to ever remarry and have more children. My daughter was about 2 years old. I was just in my low 20s. I didn't know, what was expected of me, so I asked. So after several days, actually, nobody wanted to be the person who told Srila Prabhupada what happened. But finally, his servant, who was Kirti at the time, did tell Srila Prabhupada, and also said that the widow wants to remarry. So, which didn't look very good for me, but before I knew it, I was called in for a darshan in Srila Prabhupada's quarters. So I was terrified. I said, I'm not going. So my brother said, I'll go with you, I'll go with you. And we formulated a plan while running around finding a babysitter for Nimai and running around getting ready to go up to his quarters. And the plan was that if things were looking bleak for me, I would give him a nudge or a sign, and he would explain to Srila Prabhupada, my sister feels like she needs to remarry for protection. This was our plan. Like, we were thinking that we could control the situation, possibly manipulate. So we go running upstairs, and before we even got into his quarters, this was in Los Angeles, his quarters, we were in the doorway, and I heard Prabhupada say, so you wish to remarry? I was terrified. I said, in a voice I could barely recognize, I said, not right away, Srila Prabhupada. I just wanted to know if I would be forbidden. And he said, forbidden? I will not forbid you, but you are asking my opinion? What could I say to that? No thanks, I'll pass. I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. He said, don't do it. And by this time, we all sat down. It was myself, my brother, and Kirti. We were alone in his quarters. He began to say, what is your guarantee the next one will be different? In this age, the women are entrained in chastity, the men are entrained in dharma. What is your guarantee the next one will be different? Can he give you a written guarantee? He was making jokes. He said, Krishna has already given you one child. Marriage is for union. For children, you already have one child. Give all your love to that child. And he said a lot of other things that I don't remember exactly everything, but I remember at some point I must have given my brother the nudge, because he said, Srila Prabhupada, my sister feels like she needs to remarry for protection. And Prabhupada's eyes got really big, and he said, you are not protected to me. You are not protected to my brother. You are not protected to Shruti Kirti. He said, just see, there is no faith. And he went on to explain how, in relation to Krishna, we're all Prakriti. Krishna is the only Purusha. We're all Prakriti, that a man cannot actually protect his wife. He can't protect her from disease, from old age, from death. Only Krishna is our only protection. He was speaking the philosophy. It was a little lofty because we were new devotees. I could see in the eyes of the other two, it was like, whoa. And this is what he was saying to us. And let me think. Then my brother recited some Sanskrit, and he said, Srila Prabhupada, I will protect her. I am her brother. And Prabhupada said, very nice. And during this time, I really didn't look up much because I was so terrified. I kind of looked down. I looked up once, and I just remember he was sitting behind his desk, and the sun was shining in the window, and his beautiful, round, soft head was effulgent and golden, and his voice was like coming from ages. And I just thought, I felt like a fly. I felt so insignificant and soiled. I was just absolutely terrified. So he didn't say much to me because I didn't look up. But as we were leaving, he said something, and all three of us turned around. And then Prabhupada only looked at me and only spoke to me. And he said, read the books. I have written so many books. All day long I read, I write, I chant, I take bath. You do like this. And he said it with such compassion and love. And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And that was the end of it. We walked down the stairs. And then, when I first became a widow, other people were saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, you should do that. But after that, I could say, oh, no, Prabhupada didn't tell me that. Prabhupada didn't tell me that. Prabhupada told me that. Really, nobody knew what was said, but I had a personal darshan.
After Srila Prabhupada met my mother, he asked me, where is your father? And I said, oh, they're divorced. So he said, when the father has children and he remarries, then he is lost. Now, I didn't know what he meant, so I thought about that. I didn't say anything. What did he mean? Did he mean that the father, he is a lost personality? What he meant was he is lost to the first child, to the children of the first wife. He is lost to them. And so I came to the conclusion that's what he meant. My father is lost. I thought, well, big deal. Now I have Prabhupada, right? I have a father. I have a spiritual father. What can that other father give me? Absolutely nothing. Give me no guidance, no leadership. Prabhupada always said to respect them. They gave you the body. That's fine. But now I have a real father. So I think many, many devotees felt that way.
Srila Prabhupada looked in this Mataji Gopa, who lives in New Vrindavan. She was, just there in her sari, and it was a little, chilly in the evening. And Srila Prabhupada asked her, he said, are you okay? Are you warm enough? And she was like, so shy, she didn't say anything. And then Kaladri started to say, well, she's just happy to be here, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, no. He said, you should make sure that these women are taken care of. He said, you should ask at least once a month if they need anything. And you have to make sure that you're protecting them and that you take care of them. And, it was just another example how Prabhupada was very concerned and compassionate. We were taking care of the woman and making sure that they had everything. He even said he said, they're shy, they won't ask, so you have to make sure and ask and make sure that they have everything they need.
There were a lot of women that didn't have husbands. For some reason, the husbands left or whatever, and they had children. And most of the women were hoping to remarry, because we were all pretty young at the time. And like myself, the women wanted sons, they wanted a fixed-up husband. So one time I was listening to his class, and we were in the balcony, and he said, I think I have it verbatim, if a woman remarries in the presence of a child, she becomes the enemy of that child. And I saw 4 or 5 hands go up. And then without looking up, Prabhupada said son or daughter. And the hands went down, because all these women, including myself, had daughters. I already knew the answer, but some of the women were hoping. And he immediately, without even looking up, said son or daughter. And that was pretty interesting.
We did not wear saris. We wore skirts, and I did farm work. And this is secondhand, because when Hariva and I were talking about, the whole, how many devotees got into the Indian, what we call the subculture, because I never was a part of that. I like Indian saris and all the temple incense and all of that, but basically it was reading and writing, and that's what we were a part of. Hariva would get the Prabhupada's transcripts, and he would edit them, and then he would give them to Dasi, who would type them while I was watching her child, so at night I would get to read it before anybody else. And that was the basis of our conversations and our lifestyle, and Hariva and I would sometimes talk about things such as, and the whole part about wearing saris and being a part of the Indian culture, which to us was not very important. And Hariva mentioned that he had told Prabhupada that he felt like these children were going to be neurotic if they grew up in America trying to act like Indian people. And Prabhupada said that, yes, but their children will be the light of the world. I have a plan. And we understood from that it's inevitable that, new ideas are always going to be met with misunderstanding and some confusion. But we see it now. Look at the mainstream. Who's shocked by yoga or vegetarianism anymore? Which in West Virginia in 1970 was radical.
This one morning, me and this other devotee boy named Susil got to walk with Prabhupada. And I guess we had the best scores in Bhagavad Gita class, so, only 2 of us were allowed to go because, they didn't want the whole Gurukul disturbing Prabhupada's morning walk. So I had to promise to, be quiet and be respectful, and I got to go. And it was really awesome because Prabhupada remembered me from LA, and it just made me feel like, out of all these people that were surrounding him, he knew me. I was small, and we're used to everybody being bigger than us and just ignoring us. And it was really cool that he took the time he remembered me. And anyway, when we got to go on the walk together, he told me to walk right next to him, and I just felt like it was another experience where I'm looking back now, it means so much more. But even at the time, it was the highlight of my life. At the time, it was the highlight of my life. It would be like nowadays any celebrity or Obama sitting next to you. It was literally the most important person in my world. I was right next to them. You know what I mean? And it was But what really, over the years, has struck me is how I felt so in awe of Prabhupada, but Prabhupada never came off like that with me. He was always like my grandfather or an uncle.
And Prabhupada always found a way of dealing with devotees to bring out the most service that they were capable of. That's how he dealt with me. And that's how he dealt with every devotee. When I was able to see Prabhupada's exchanges, that's how he dealt with Harkesh. He sent him to Europe when he didn't want to go, and look what happened. So Srila Prabhupada just knew exactly how to deal personally, perfectly with every one of his disciples, to have the most service pour out of him. So that morning when I arrived, we were talking about these things, and then Prabhupada said, okay, now you must be tired. Go take rest. And I said, no, I'm not tired. No, go and take rest. Prabhupada, I'm not tired. Gopal Krishna. Prabhupada, he's not tired. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, now that I'm here and just being with you, I don't feel tired at all. And Prabhupada said, that is the principle of love. That when you love someone, he will not be tired. You just want to be with them. That is love. So Prabhupada was encouraging me like that, but there was this principle that whenever you're with Prabhupada, because everyone who was with Prabhupada loved him so much, they were able to go without sleep.
There was this fellow on the sidewalk who would make newspaper headlines for tourists. You tell, Deborah's birthday, whatever you want. Give him. I said, look, my spiritual master is coming to town. Make one for my guru, will you? He said, sure, for free. He did it for free. I thought, this is great. This guy is going back to Godhead. So he said, what should I say? I said, all right, Krishna consciousness takes over the world. Might as well go for the jugular. He made it. So that day, Srila Prabhupada lands at the airport. If you ever see the pictures of that New York landing, there's some hand that says Channel 4. That's my hand. I seldom got close to Srila Prabhupada, but somebody said, hold the microphone. So that was my Vapu Seva famous picture. I think you'll see it in the Lilamrita volume and it's in the inset. Anyway, so I gave Prabhupada this headline: Krishna consciousness takes over the world. And Prabhupada, he started glowing. I'm telling you, he looks like the sun and moon combined when he started. When he was pleased, he was so thrilled. And he was pointing and saying, I couldn't hear. My hearing's never been that good, so I got close. And he was saying, who is printed? Who is printed? And right away, I got a rock in my throat. You know, I printed. But basically, Prabhupada was so magnanimous that the fact that I had printed even one, that would have been good. That's how magnanimous, you know, our spiritual master is. He had, his servant then was Aravinda. And Aravinda said, it's a joke, Prabhupada, it's a joke. You know, he couldn't see the humor in it. So Prabhupada said, think nothing of it. But as I heard from Gargamuni, I mean, poor Aravinda, the guy left and he came back and wanted to talk to Prabhupada one-on-one, and Prabhupada said to him, it is good you have left. You are an enemy in our movement. Prabhupada never said that to anybody except this guy, which is really unfortunate for the poor guy.
When I was a new devotee in Boston, and ISKCON Press was there, Satsvarup, and all these old devotees, and I used to really like the stories that they would tell, especially Satsvarup would tell these stories when Prabhupada was first opening up ISKCON in New York, about how Prabhupada was very inquisitive about things. And I thought, wow, that'd be really kind of nice to be able to, offer Srila Prabhupada some information that he wanted. And for some reason, I just, I had that, in me. So on this morning walk in New Vrindavan, we were walking along, and all of a sudden a calf walked down in front of where Srila Prabhupada was walking. And Srila Prabhupada, put his cane in the ground and he stopped. And he said, how old is that calf? And because I was like right next to him, I distinctly heard him say, how old is that calf? So I used to work in the barn. I was, one of the cowherd boys, but at that point, I hadn't worked in the barn for like 2 or 3 years. So I looked around to see if any of the other cowherd boys were there who would know, exactly how old the calf was. But nobody was around. So I looked at the calf, like really hard to see if I could figure out how old it was, and I could see that, the milk bag was still up, that it, hadn't dropped down yet. So I said, well, it's very young, Srila Prabhupada, because the milk bag hasn't dropped down. And Srila Prabhupada looked at me and he said, I know that. And when he said that, I just thought, oh my God, I'm such a fool, why did I ever have that, desire that I could, offer Srila Prabhupada something, some information, he already knows that. And so I kind of felt kind of bad, and I kind of went to the back, I kind of slipped to the back of the walk as the other people were walking forward. And, anyways, I felt a little bad about that. So the very next day, he, would give the morning program down at Bahulaban in New Vrindavan. And then after his Bhagavatam class, he would walk out to his car, and he'd usually get into the car and drive to where he was living. So this time, he walked out to his car. They're having like a little kirtan as he walks, and then somebody opened up the door for him to get into the car. But he didn't get into the car. He just looked over the top of the car across the road to the field that was there. And I was like standing, right there, right next to him. And he turned around and he had this little smile on his face. And he looked at me and he said, what's growing over there? And I happened to know that they had planted mung beans there. So I said, oh, those are mung beans, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, oh, thank you very much. And then he got in the car. And I couldn't believe it. I was ecstatic. I couldn't believe like how he read my mind, and he knew that I wanted to, answer one of his questions like that, and he gave me another chance. And, he drove off, and I was just, for days, I was like, I couldn't believe he did that. I couldn't believe he actually asked me another question, and this time I knew the answer. But it was so endearing, and just such a little thing, but it just made my life, so to speak.
I remember one time Prabhupada met with some reporters, and Prabhupada was explaining that this movement is presenting the science of God, the absolute truth, the absolute knowledge, the highest knowledge to mankind, and this will save mankind. And they were asking, well, how do you know it's the absolute truth? What, are you telling us that you hear God speak, and therefore you know what God wants? And Srila Prabhupada said, yes. Now, I was in this room thinking that these reporters, they're going to take this the wrong way because they're not devotees to really understand that that's Prabhupada's position. So I said, what Prabhupada means is that the message of God is coming down through parampara, this disciplic line, unbroken. And so when Prabhupada repeats it, that is the message of... And Prabhupada interrupted me. He says, no, that is not what I mean. And the reporter says, so what, you're saying you directly see God and speak to God? I said, yes. So, apart from me being revealed as an utter fool for even trying to interject, because Prabhupada had a way of knowing how he wanted to preach to reporters, to scientists, to philosophers, to scholars, to priests and religionists. And there were times where he would call someone a rascal to their face. He probably knew what he was saying and doing perfectly. This was one of those times where he's actually willing to reveal himself to a non-devotee like that.
I was a receptionist at the Brooklyn Temple. And once again, you could hear a pin drop. And it was very, very quiet. So I would greet guests whenever they would come in. And sometimes there would not be any guests, so I would simply sit at my desk and chant Hare Krishna. And one time it was very, very quiet. And Prabhupada's quarters were kind of in the back. And so I'm sitting there quietly chanting my rounds, and all of a sudden I hear something. It's Prabhupada singing and playing his harmonium. He was alone. I didn't hear any devotees. It was just Prabhupada singing and playing. It was that song, Sava Avatara Sava Shiromani. And I was listening. It was pretty loud. I don't know if a door was open, but I could hear it pretty good. And I was enjoying it very much so, because nobody was talking. It was just me and Prabhupada. And as I was listening, all of a sudden, Prabhupada started sobbing. And then he couldn't sing anymore. And then he stopped playing harmonium. Prabhupada was sobbing, stopped playing for a few moments. And then after a few moments, he started singing and playing harmonium again. It was very special. I didn't hear any devotees. Then he played and sang for Krishna. And then a little while later, he started sobbing again. And he started sobbing and stopped playing. And it happened a few more times. This was so special, I started crying. And it meant a lot because I knew no one else was there. It was just Prabhupada and me. And I could not believe what I heard. Just Prabhupada having this love for Krishna, sobbing and crying and stopping over and over again.
I remember he was giving darshan at that time. The next day he was upstairs. All the devotees are in the room there. So I had been out on Sankirtan. I collected a little money. I had bought a gold-plated cross pen for $12, which is what it cost. And I went in and I gave it to Srila Prabhupada. And he took it and he looked at it and said, "I have got," and he waved it. "You would like?" He offered it back to me. I said, "No, please keep it, Srila Prabhupada." And he started talking about sannyas, so I asked him if I could take sannyas. And he said, "Yes, you may take sannyas when you have no sex desire." He could always say no in the most gentle fashion.
It was near the end of the darshan, and my godbrother Taru asked a question, and he said, "Srila Prabhupada, you know, when we talk to the farmers around New Vrindavan and tell them about Krishna, they say that they don't have time to worship God. They're just too busy. They work too hard. They don't have time." And Prabhupada was just sitting there, you know, listening, and Dristadumna was on one side with a chamara whisk, whisking Prabhupada, and Pusta Krishna had a peacock fan, and he was on the other side. So Prabhupada just said, "Pusta Krishna, you answer." So he was, you know, still fanning. And he said, "Well, it says in the Bhagavad Gita," and Prabhupada's arm goes out, he goes, "Don't bring the Gita." You know, and everybody was like shocked. It was like silence. And then he goes, "Dristadumna, you answer." And Dristadumna, you know, the chamara whisk, he thought for a few seconds, and he said, "Well, Krishna says," and Prabhupada throws his hand out, you know, he said, "Don't bring Krishna." And it was like, you know, you could hear a pin drop. It was complete silence. It was so dramatic. Nobody knew what was going to happen, and Prabhupada leans forward in the Vyasa-san and he goes, "Okay, rascal, you know, can you make it rain? Can you make the sun shine? You know, can you make the crops grow?" And I don't remember the exact words, but it was just how the simple thing of, you know, Krishna's providing everything, and it's just worshiping Krishna is just being grateful. You know, you can't do all these things, but without bringing in, you know, any of the scriptures and stuff, just, you know, explained it on such a simple level of, you know, just be grateful for what God is giving you. You know, that's, you know, worshiping Krishna. Just be grateful.
I have a letter from Srila Prabhupada. He was on his way to Australia. Why are my books not being published? I have written these books. I have worked so hard. I have sacrificed. I have given up sleep. I've given up everything to write these books, and you're not printing. Why are you not doing this? And he wrote this to me. And I had no idea of the magnitude of the problem. I had heard from Radha Vallabha before Mayapur that there were a few books that hadn't been printed yet. I had no idea until I got this letter, which specifically said there are 17 books that haven't been printed. What are you doing? So that was like shocking. So then Prabhupada was going from Australia to Hawaii. And at that time, Harikesh was Prabhupada's personal secretary. Harikesh called me as soon as they got to Hawaii. And he said, "You better be ready. Srila Prabhupada is so angry. I have not seen him angry like this. He is coming to L.A., and he has called for sannyasis and GBC. He has called for many senior devotees to fly into L.A. to meet him there so that this problem can be straightened out. And you better be ready because he's mad." I nearly died on that telephone call. To hear that your spiritual master is mad at you is the worst thing that that anyone could ever hear. You've let him down. You failed your spiritual master. Your life is over. Well, it's either over or you correct it. So I started discussing with Radha Ballava that, look, Prabhupada's going to be here in about a week. Let's come up with a plan. And so Srila Prabhupada arrives. There's a very famous arrival address in 1975 when Prabhupada describes how his spiritual master, they had acquired this great temple or built this temple, but then his disciples were fighting over which room they were going to get. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had told Prabhupada he was disgusted by this and wished he could just sell the temple and sell the marble and get money to print books. And Prabhupada is telling us this in his arrival address from Nivasasan, saying, so I took those words from his mouth, that if you ever get money, print books. Therefore, he said, I am requesting, where is book? Where is book? Where is book? And I just felt in that time that this is the whip. Prabhupada's whipping me. Where is the book? Where is the book? So then Prabhupada said, so I ask you, I beg you, please help me. Print and distribute these books throughout the whole world. And in that way, the Krishna consciousness movement will expand. Thank you very much. And we were all just frozen with those words. It was electric that Prabhupada was personally, not just in a letter now, but personally pouring into us this command to print and distribute books. And whenever we get money, use it for books. And that's how the movement will expand. That was always Prabhupada's plan, that through distributing his books, everything will come. Money will come, temples will come, devotees will come, other things will come, because the money paid for the Bhaktivedanta Institute, it paid for the Fate Project, it paid for restaurants, it paid for so many things. Because as temples were selling books, they were also getting money. So the books were the basis of everything. And here's Prabhupada ordering this. So the very next morning, as always, we took, when Prabhupada was here in New Dwarka and the weather was okay, we would drive him to Venice Beach, where he would like to take his morning walk. So now all these sannyasis are here in New Dwarka. I mean, there's GBC sannyasis from India, from America, from all over the world. So we're on this morning walk, and there's the normal question and answers going on that devotees, and then at a certain point in the walk, Prabhupada turned and asked me, so why are there 17 books not published? What are you going to do? Now, Radha Ballava and I had worked out what we were going to respond. So we first told Srila Prabhupada that we have a plan. Right now it's taking 4 months. We have a plan to bring it down to 2 months. And then I blurted out, no, we can do it. We can double our work. Somehow we'll figure this. We can do it in 1 month, a book a month. But first we said it'll 2 months a book. And I thought, maybe, okay, we can do a book a month. So Prabhupada was walking, but was thinking, I said, a book a month, that's 17 months. I said, no. I want all the books published in 2 months, not 17 months. Well, I knew what our capabilities were, so I just blurted out, Prabhupada, that's impossible. And Prabhupada became like a lion. It's just a spiritual burst of anger and compassion all at the same time. And he put his cane down in the sand, stopped walking, and looked at me and said, impossible? Impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. And this was just like a thunderbolt through the heart. I said to Prabhupada that something is impossible. I said to someone who's come from the spiritual world that something is impossible. I said to someone who knows how God is having all the planets held up and stay in their orbits and who is all pervasive. I'm saying to this person that something is impossible. It just like, I just felt so stupid. And then Prabhupada, he paused enough for it to hit me really hard, and then he started walking again. And he's walking and talking, but all of these senior devotees, GBCs, and they're all looking at me like, what are you going to do now? Like, look at the challenge has been thrown down, and Prabhupada had been waiting. What's our answer? And I just said to Srila Prabhupada, we can do it. We'll do it. Just, you had to accept this as divine faith. His potency would make it happen. We just had to believe that nothing's impossible. So we told Srila Prabhupada that we can do it. And it's not like I asked that there be conditions, but I did ask if Srila Prabhupada could spend a little more time in Los Angeles, not just pushing and inspiring us, but helping, because I felt we were going to need some help, since these books were the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Some of our men had worked so hard just to learn Sanskrit so they could do the Sanskrit synonyms, but Bengali, that was relatively new for them. And then I knew we were going to need help, so I asked Prabhupada if he would stay longer just to help with that. Prabhupada said, yes, whatever it takes, I will do. But I want these books in 2 months.
On one of his visits to New Dwarka, I happened to be across the street. It was about 10 or 11 o'clock, and I was across the street, just about to cross 2 little Gurukula boys, about age 4 and 6. And we look up, and here comes Srila Prabhupada. You never know when you were going to see him. And there was nobody else out at that time. No one was on the street, no cars, no nothing. And here comes Srila Prabhupada. He was flanked by Ramesvara on one side and Radhaballabha on the other. And they seemed to be in a rush. And the rumors were that there were deadline problems, money problems, problems with the artwork. There was a lot going on to get these books out. And things were intense. So he's coming across the street, and I would imagine he was going towards the BBT. But he started walking straight towards us. So I thought, nah, couldn't be. And then he kept coming closer and closer, and my knees started buckling, and I'm like, he's coming right to where we're standing. Sure enough, he came right in front of us, and he pointed to one of the boys, a little boy named Gopal. And he said, he is not wearing neck beads. You can take care of this? And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. Before I could even get that out, he was gone. He was quick. He didn't waste a second. And I thought how wonderful that he engaged me. But also it was instructive how every facet of Krishna consciousness was important and was noticed by him. Because no matter what was going on with deadlines, money problems, book distribution, he noticed that one little boy didn't have neck beads. So, of course, I became a neck bead fanatic and made sure all the children had neck beads after that. But I thought, how sweet, just how sweet, and how every aspect is equally important in Krishna consciousness.
Well, there was one morning walk I recall. Dr. Patel was an omnipresent force. Dr. Patel, he used to argue with Prabhupada about, he would say that Prabhupada would tell him that I do not tell my disciples chant Prabhupada, Prabhupada. I would tell them to chant Krishna. So you should not tell them that in your group you chant this name Swami Narayan. They should be chanting Hare Krishna, not the name of Swami Narayan. And they would argue back and forth. So one day along the beach, there was a lady standing there. And she had this beautiful deity of Ganesh she was holding. So she walked up and showed it to Srila Prabhupada. And it was a gorgeous little, very, very beautifully done. So Prabhupada said, yes, these are the fruitive, the karmakandi, the people that pray for fruitive gain. They install the deity of Ganesh, and they worship and say, please, may I have this? Give me that. Give me this. And then when they get what they want, they take the deity and say, now get out! And they throw it to the ocean. Prabhupada said, now get out! And then he started walking on. And the lady, she was very satisfied to hear that. And also, I could see her that she looked at the deity after that very fondly. Like, I will never reject this deity. I will now go home and worship this deity. She had a very great look of love, like she'd been enlightened. That was the benefit of meeting a pure devotee, even just for a moment. That your whole outlook becomes changed. And that lady certainly had a changed outlook after that.
Something awkward happened towards the latter part of 1974, where there were some issues. Again, I was reporting to Bali Mardan and to Srila Prabhupada, and there were some issues at that time where I didn't feel comfortable with the requests that I was getting out of our New York branch of the BBT. It got to such a discomfort that I wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada that I can't follow the orders I'm getting, and yet that's my duty to follow these orders. And so I wrote to Prabhupada and said, I just have to resign. I can't, in good conscience, follow the order which I thought would affect BBT money. It would be like money not spent on the BBT. So I just wrote to Srila Prabhupada that I can't follow the order, so the only choice I have is to resign. I didn't realize that some other senior devotees had written to Srila Prabhupada and were discussing this situation. So Prabhupada wrote back to me. I think this is a famous letter. He said, we'll discuss your situation at the Mayapur Festival in 1975, but he said, I hope by then that you'll come to your sound condition of mind, because this request to resign is insane. And Prabhupada wrote, there is no such thing in spiritual life as resignation. Once having surrendered, it can never be withdrawn. Never be withdrawn. I will never forget those words. I only one other time did I fail to follow it, to my great, great, great regret. And since that time, by Prabhupada's mercy, I've been slightly reawakened from my comatose condition, and I am able to pray that he'll let me serve him again. So only once did I actually really fail to follow that order. And now I'm trying to repent. I fully regret it, and I'm begging for him to let me come back and serve him again. But that's the order. Once having surrendered, it can never be withdrawn.
So this was on a morning walk in New Vrindavan, and we had some kshatriyas. They, supposed to be, protectors of the devotees and stuff there. And they were on the morning walk, and one of them asked Srila Prabhupada the question, that is it all right to kill some of the rabbits and the groundhogs because they're eating the produce in Krishna's garden? So, they're stealing from the deities and the devotees. Is it all right if we kill them? And Prabhupada was disturbed. He said no. He said you should grow enough so that they can eat too. And he was visibly, he was very, very concerned that no, you shouldn't kill them.
We went to Hyderabad, as I recall. It was sometime in '77. I think it was in the spring. And they had just gotten the Hyderabad farm. So Prabhupada was going to be there, so we drove over and got there that morning. We just arrived when Srila Prabhupada was taking a walk. And here comes Srila Prabhupada, and, devotees are around this tree. In India they have a platform underneath the tree, as I recall. And they put cement so people could sit under the shade of the tree. I forget what the name of that platform is. And devotees had eaten at this platform the day before, and they hadn't cleaned up. There were yellow stuck rice everywhere. And I had just arrived. Innocent, Your Honor. I had not eaten. Just like I didn't sign the contract in Edinburgh, right? So anyways, guilty by association. So Srila Prabhupada comes up, and he doesn't want to sit down because there's dirty rice. Why should the pure devotee, the spiritual master, whom we honor on par with God himself, sit on somebody's dirty remnant? So he starts saying, why isn't this clean? And devotees, they're just gaping. So I whipped out my trusty penknife and I start scraping up this rice. Suddenly there's silence everywhere. And it was like reminiscent of, I'm on the spot again. I'm scraping this rice and silence, and I look up. Prabhupada is just looking right at me. He said, what is that? Is that a knife? I said, huh? Is it a knife? I said, it's only a little knife, Srila Prabhupada. He said, yes. You can use it on your throat. But the thing is, here again, this is something that you have to have happen to you, because even though his voice was so angry and harsh, if you look in his eyes, they're as soft as a cow's. They're soft, gentle, loving. And with little things like this, he would actually capture you forever. He would do something whereby you could never forget him. And what does that mean? You have a better chance of going back to home, back to Godhead, by the grace of the pure devotee. But I think the reason is because, as Prabhupada said during that incident, that Brahmins use water to clean. So if you want something clean, you use water. Other than that, it's some lingering sin in my past life, which the spiritual master, out of his eternal kindness, is rooting out of me and pulling out. And I'm sure I'm a very hard devotee to deliver. So I require extreme measures. And because of that, I humbly bow down to the lotus feet of my spiritual master eternally and beg him to forgive me despite my impurities, to try to drag me a little closer to Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and I'll be a good boy from here on out.
There were actual unbona fide cults in America at this time. Different yoga groups, or even there was a religious group that had started from Korea. And there were different groups that parents, I think, could have legitimate concerns about, but not about us. And Prabhupada would just present all of these wonderful arguments about brain. Of course their brain has to be washed, because look at what they're doing otherwise. What is your objection? And he would give arguments. So at one point, two of our devotees were actually indicted by a court. Not a court, it's a, whatever that group is that presents, that you present arguments to, and then they issue an indictment, and then it goes to court, a grand jury. Two of our devotees were indicted by a grand jury under a false charge that they had kidnapped and brainwashed somebody's son or daughter, and that they would only give the son or daughter back if they were paid money. This happened in New York. Adikeshwar Maharaj was one of the 2 devotees that was indicted under this absurd charge. Well, something very interesting was happening around America. Professors who had gotten our books from the BBT library party and met our preachers, they were outraged, and they were beginning to speak out in favor of the Hare Krishna movement not being a cult, but being a wonderful movement, a bona fide religious movement. And they were just describing the most amazing, they were attributing the most amazing things to Prabhupada and his books and to the Hare Krishna movement. And this was becoming like this huge phenomenon in the media. Talk shows. We were being asked to be on talk shows, on national radio, on syndicated television programs, and of course in the newspapers. There was this debate going on for months about whether or not this is a cult and we've brainwashed people. Well, there was this great Sankirtan devotee in New Dwarka. Her name was Leela Shakti. She was on an original Sankirtan party, and her mother is the most nicest mother devotee. Her name is Rose Forcash. She, on her own, made an effort to get interviewed and get on these talk shows and be interviewed by the newspapers. And even once she was on a nationally syndicated television program to debate against the parents in favor of this accusation. And she would describe how her daughter was saved by the Hare Krishna movement. Saved from what? From drugs, from illicit sex, from being a hippie. How grateful she is to the Hare Krishna movement for what it did for her daughter. And then she would conclude by saying, and if I had known about this Hare Krishna movement when I was young, I would have joined it. So I presented this article to Prabhupada. Oh, he was just, first he would talk about Leela Shakti. She is such a great devotee. She can do everything. And then he would talk about her mother. What a great service she is doing. And you could see not just how pleased Prabhupada was, but just the idea that a parent would appreciate what Prabhupada is doing. It just Prabhupada loved that, and he just bestowed his blessings on them for that.
Srila Prabhupada came with his car, and there was one other car that came with him. And he got out of the car and he started walking through the palace, and Kirtananda was showing him different things. But it was just a dirt floor, just no roof, just really a construction site, some bare concrete blocks. And Srila Prabhupada was like poking the concrete blocks with his cane. We had this door jamb. He'd be poking it with his cane. Just seeing how sturdy it was and stuff. And there was a pallet with bags of cement with plastic over it. And he said, "What is this?" And they said, "Those are just bags of concrete." And he said, "This is not right." And we were thinking, covered with plastic, there's no roof anywhere, what else can you do? And it wasn't until like a few days after Srila Prabhupada left and we needed to use some of it, that when we opened it up, we noticed that when it had rained, some of the water had gotten through the plastic and it had ruined some of the bags. But, Prabhupada was so perceptive that he, pointed it out, just from seeing it like that. And, right after that, then, he started to walk out of the palace, and Bali Mardan was there, and he said, "Srila Prabhupada, it says in the Krishna book that Krishna's palaces in Dwarka, they were illuminated with the jewels on the wall." And Prabhupada stopped, and he lifted his cane, and he waved it at the devotees that were there, and he said, "These devotees are my jewels."
Srila Prabhupada was absolutely empowered to empower others to present this truth in this way. And so writing was very important to me. And I remember once I had a notebook like this. It was one of these composition books. And I wrote, like 30 or 40 poems to Prabhupada in it. And I gave it to him at Henry Street. And he took it, and he said, yes, poetic, this is a quality of a devotee. And then he actually took my book, and he embraced it like this. And he started hugging this book. And then he looked at it, turned it upside down, and hugged it again. And he repeated that over and over again. And he left it right near his Vyasasana. It became a part of his permanent room there for quite some time. So this is how much Srila Prabhupada appreciates his work. So I see a lot of nice stuff coming out of Vrindavan. Our godbrother Pundarik Vidyanidhi and Bhanu Swami, they're producing books like that. Subhag Swami, Gaudiya Vaishnava literature. And really having us push on the movement in this way is Prabhupada's blessing upon us. So writing is very important.
One letter he wrote, the temples, they are not places for eating and sleeping, but they are bases from which we send out our devotees to fight with Maya. Just like during wartime, the bombs are raining down from the sky like anything. So letters like that made us realize we are Prabhupada's army. We are completely under the control of the general of the universe, the Sankirtan, Srila Prabhupada. We are his army, and this is what we do.
And Prabhupada is explaining his philosophy about, the human form of life and so on, and what it's for. And so the what did they call them in those days? Moderators. The moderator says, so Swamiji, what if we don't want to take to your Krishna consciousness? So Srila Prabhupada said, then you can be cat or dog. And they said, well, thank you very much, Swamiji. Very nice. Let's go. Okay, that's the end of this interview. They just hustled them out. And Prabhupada was smiling from ear to ear while they were getting rid of him. So when they got downstairs, he turns to Mukunda and he says, so what did you think of my answer? So, Prabhupada drew a line. Which side of the line are you on? It wasn't about interfaith. He didn't go out and say, yes, we also have a religion like you have religion. No. If you want to have a religion, you live according to certain principles. No meat eating right away. Otherwise, in fact, I asked Prabhupada that question once about meat eating. It was at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and he very clearly told me. He answered, right to me. One of those days when I could get up the guts. He said, whatever animal you eat, you have to come back as that animal. Very clear, uncompromising.
And on the one hand, there was concern about this competition. It seemed almost, is this a material thing? Because competition, where you want to defeat somebody, it sounds like the material world. So I wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada about competition. And Prabhupada wrote back that there is competition in the spiritual world. There is competition in Krishna Loka, amongst the gopis, for Krishna's affection. But the difference between material competition and spiritual competition, and Prabhupada was very clear about this in his letter. He said, material competition, you want to bring down the person you're competing with. And in spiritual competition, you're trying to, all of you are trying to please the same person, Krishna. And if someone exceeds you, you're not interested in bringing them down. You're glorifying them because they've pleased the one you love. He said, it is so different. He says, yes, competition, like everything, it exists in the spiritual world in its pure form.
I remember the first Vyas Puja book that we did was 1969 New York. It was a small one. And I wrote a poem for Srila Prabhupada called To Prabhupada. And Narayan right away puts it to music and sings it. He liked it. And Srila Prabhupada appreciated this poem. Let me see if I can remember it. Paramhansa of the nectar lake, didst thou thine own true love forsake, leaving his fragrant lotus breath to come to this world of birth and death? Or is this a helping hand you lend, while this world of matter you transcend? I am perplexed, please let it be known, if you have come here to take me home. My feeble memory cannot recall, did I once in anger slip and fall? If there is truth, then tell me where. From this I'll turn, go with you there. And tell me, please, of Vrindavan, the cowherd boy, the gentle one, who's known as Krishna, Nanda's son. To his abode I long to run. O Paramhansa of our land, I see in glory that you stand. 10,000 times a day I beg, let me thank you for your helping hand.
There was a line which Prabhupada did not want us to cross, but we could go up to that line. The line was not to do anything illegal. But as far as going up to the line, you could tell a person that this will help them become more attractive, this will help a person become more acceptable, more accepted, more achieve great things in their business, take over for their boss, get all kinds of things could be said as long as it was not illegal in terms of your dealing with the exchange of books for money. He didn't want a person saying they want to change and then you didn't give it to them, things like that. But so we had some letters back and forth with Prabhupada about the morality of book distribution and how far we could go. It was great. He kept pushing us. And even once we told Prabhupada, but people are complaining we are aggressive. And Prabhupada said, yes, you have to be aggressive to give them. I mean, we are so desirous of giving to people. Not aggressive to take, aggressive to give. So he always kept our spirit on a pure spiritual platform. And it was very important that Prabhupada was guiding his Sankirtan army and his Sankirtan movement. These letters would be distributed to every temple instantly, as soon as they came out, because they were relevant to every temple. I remember when I was traveling with Prabhupada, in that, again, in 1977, I had actually been storing up a lot of questions. And over the years we hear Prabhupada saying different things. One of the things that we had heard Prabhupada talk about is about the future of the Hare Krishna movement, and whether or not eventually it would be like a governing body in this planet, in the world. We had heard so many things that, Prabhupada had said about the communist countries. And there was all this speculation. It was the height of the Cold War, whether or not there would actually be a war. Because at one point, Prabhupada said, if there is a war, it will start between the proxies of America and Russia, Pakistan and India. He had once said that. So there was a lot of concern. Is there going to be a war? And is there going to, and what is the Hare Krishna movement really going to convince people so that they become a government? So I asked a lot of questions about this when I was with Prabhupada. And some of Prabhupada's answers are not just time and place answers. They are eternally relevant answers. The most important, Prabhupada did say, yes, people will want a perfect government. The time will come when people, they're searching for leadership, they want it so badly, and they will see that the Hare Krishnas, people, devotees, they're perfect. They have qualities, spiritual qualities that are so obvious that they will turn towards them. And there will be a Hare Krishna government. And I asked Prabhupada, how is this going to happen? Is it going to happen by a vote of the population? Is it going to happen by a revolution? Small group of people take over? Because there's different ways that governments change. Are people going to literally join the Hare Krishna religion, and that's how it's going to happen? Because why else would they vote for us? I was thinking. And Prabhupada said that this is going to come about not in the way you think. No, it's not necessarily that people are going to become Hare Krishna devotees, and therefore tens of millions, hundreds of millions of them are going to vote you into power. But it's not going to be a revolution by a small group, no. It is going to be by the population, the mass population wanting it. But they're not necessarily going to be Hare Krishna devotees. But they are going to be wanting it because something spiritual has awakened in them. And they could stay in their own faith. They could be Christians, Jews, whatever they are. But something spiritual will awaken in them, and that will cause them to recognize. And Prabhupada said, and that day will come. And I said, Prabhupada, how is that going to happen? And I was with Hari Suri at the time. And Prabhupada said, that is Sankirtan. That is the Sankirtan movement. And not just the chanting of the holy names. Prabhupada said, that is book. That is the real, ultimate effect of our book distribution. And we asked Prabhupada very specifically, do you mean that it's creating some kind of a subtle spiritual atmosphere in the world? Because when we give out millions of books, it's not like millions of people join from taking those books. And Prabhupada said, yes, that is exactly what it is. The benefit of taking these books and hearing in public the chanting of the holy names on Harinam Sankirtan is creating and will create a spiritual environment that will awaken souls, whatever their denomination. This is the most powerful realization that Prabhupada shared with us about book distribution.
They were building the World Trade Center at that time. Srila Prabhupada was especially unimpressed with this artificial nuts and bolts society that has gigantic skyscrapers and yet no means to maintain the people that live inside. So it was interesting, somebody said to him that, they're building the world's tallest buildings over there, Prabhupada. He said, they will all be destroyed. The World Trade Center. And in fact, astrologically, they were destroyed under the nakshatra that Prabhupada was born on, Mrigashirsha nakshatra. Prabhupada, he often revealed that he could see the future, but he did it in kind of an oblique fashion.
I remember another thing that Srila Prabhupada told me during that time that's very important. He talked about the coming of unemployment in the Kali Yuga. And we're seeing this now. This is 2009, almost 2010. It's a bad economic time. But Prabhupada was talking that as the Kali Yuga progresses, more and more there will be unemployment. And Prabhupada said, we must be ready to take these unemployed people into our movement on our farms. That's what Prabhupada said, that we need farm communities that can grow food. Because, and he predicted this, that one day millions of people will be coming to our Hare Krishna farms because they're unemployed. And we must accept them. We must feed them. We must let them live there, and they will gradually become spiritualized. We'll put them to work. They will get their food. It will be prasadam. They will hear something about Krishna, and they will gradually, by the millions, become devotees. This is Prabhupada's prediction about Kali Yuga and unemployment and the Krishna conscious farm communities. Amazing prediction and vision.
The favorite analogy of mine that he gave, which describes, our good fortune, is, the turtle under the water. He comes up once a year for air. And there's a piece of wood floating with a knothole in it. What are the odds that that turtle's head is going to go through that knothole? Those are the odds that you and I have encountered. Look how many millions of living entities there are. They don't even have a human form of life, and when they do, what are they going to do? They're going to go to Colonel Sanders. You and I are saved. We're actually saved from the ocean of birth and death. We've been delivered. There's no greater blessing that you could ever achieve in life than this. And this is because we have that rare good fortune. We have to cherish every moment of it. This is such a great opportunity for us here in the darkness of Kali Yuga.
What really makes me think about this more is I realize that none of us would know each other if not for Prabhupada. All of the friends and wonderful people that I know, that my family's married into their families or they're friends of ours, none of that would have happened if Prabhupada hadn't come here. We'd have been in New Jersey and Buffalo and, you know what I mean? Everybody would have been everywhere. Maybe some of us would know each other because I know a lot of groups of friends join, but for the most part, most of the people I know, I wouldn't know. And it always strikes me. And I know some fantastic people. Like through everything I've gone through as a devotee, what's been amazing is I've met some very incredible devotees through this process. And, I think it's very important to thank Srila Prabhupada for that. Just the people we've met. They wouldn't have been as this good a quality people if not for him. And that's something that affects us in our daily lives. And I think about Prabhupada every day. I can't help it. He was just one cool cat.
Brahmananda said in a class in Vrindavan a few years ago that in the beginning we were like Prabhupada's guinea pigs, or better still, like his laboratory rats. And I can think of so many instances, like even in my own life, after I got married, in which Satsvarup did a fire yajna, we also got married legally. I called my mother to tell her I was now a married woman. And my mother said, "Really? What's his name?" And I said, "Hold on, I'll ask him," because I didn't know his regular name. And my mother said, "Hold on, I'll ask him? You're nuts." Bang, hung the phone up. And I thought, that's pretty far out and revolutionary even for me. But, marrying someone you didn't know, dancing on the street in sheets, we would do a lot for Prabhupada, because look what he did for us. And I'm so proud and grateful to have been among Prabhupada's laboratory rats. I would gladly be one again and again, many, many, many lifetimes over.
The most amazing thing that I saw in Srila Prabhupada, apart from the fact that when he chanted Jai Radha Madhava and went to be with Krishna, was how incessantly he was focused on saving every soul. And with such love and compassion. If a godbrother of mine that Prabhupada had done service for Prabhupada, if he had left, Prabhupada sometimes would talk to me or even write me a letter, "I want you to go and get him back. Do not let him leave. I love him so much. He is my son." I have instructions like that from Srila Prabhupada about two very senior, and Prabhupada used me to help them come back, actually. It was amazing. So, he loved every soul. This is the most amazing thing about Prabhupada. But it's not just his disciples that he loved, as much as he loved them as his children. He loved every soul. And to follow in some small way his footsteps and to bathe yourself in the dust of his lotus feet means, to me, to follow Prabhupada as he is an eternal Leela of saving souls in this universe. And going on Sankirtan and doing, and at every moment thinking of how you could use something in Krishna's service to attract people to Krishna, to bring people to Krishna. That's what I saw in Srila Prabhupada. His vision never stopped working on using things to bring souls back to Krishna. The highest mood of Krishna Prema. That was Srila Prabhupada's mood. It's coming directly from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda. He is the absolute Shaktivesh avatar of Lord Nityananda in that respect. There's not one soul that Prabhupada does not want saved. And so if we somehow can pray to imbibe that feeling, that vision, if you think about that vision, that's how you're going to see everyone as a spirit soul. Going on Sankirtan forces you to, if you think about it in the right way, to develop spiritual vision. That's how you develop it. It's so easy when you go on Sankirtan and think of that. You will always start seeing people as spirit souls. So if I can imbibe of all the things I saw from Prabhupada, that's what I would want to be in me eternally. Because if it's in me, then I will always be Prabhupada's servant. I think I'll always be accepted as Prabhupada's servant if I could just imbibe that. That's Prabhupada's mood, as I saw it, to save every soul. I pray for that.